What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to the Nightmares Podcast, where we talk about all things horror, movies, music, pop culture, and in this case, really awesome television shows. We are exclusively going to guests only on our podcast, which we are so excited about. It's been a great run thus this far, and we are very excited to have our guest, Mr. Al Omega. If you wouldn't be so kind to introduce yourself and tell us what you're all about.
Well, thank you for having me, of course. And I'm Al Omega, the Alpha and Omega of all things science fiction and horror. And I've had this little show I've been doing for 14 years now. In fact, next year will be my 15th year. And what you out there in Chicago may not know is that out in the Bay Area, we had a TV show called Creature Features with Bob Wilkins running it. And in 2008, his old director, Tom Wersch, asked an associate of mine and I to come in and bring the show back so that we could raise awareness for his new movie, Keep America Strong, which was a retrospective of Bob Wilkins' life. And I've been doing it ever since. And actually, next year we will have been on longer, I think, than Bob Wilkins and John Stanley, his successor, were on Channel 2. So good time.
That is awesome. That is awesome. You're doing the good work of the horror community, which we appreciate. The and obviously, to our Chicago audience is going to obviously recognize and talk about Sven Gulli. You run a show that is similar but different. You have your own twist and style on it, but the format is relative. Is somewhat similar. With you discussing the horror and then obviously showing the horror movies after the fact. Which is very, very cool. It's a fun show. It's a fun experience. So I obviously you went into a little bit of history about the creation of the show. But one of the questions I always ask, and it's one of my episode favorites to ask, which is, when did horror touch your life? When did this crazy fandom of horror touch? Because this is all what we're all about. It's all about horror on this podcast, talking about our experiences and how we grew up with it, and then we eventually talk about how that wonderful obsession translated into a career, into a passion. And everybody has a lot of different passions about how they show their fandom of horror. But where did this crazy horror journey for you begin?
Well, for me, I guess, like many people in the San Francisco Bay Area, I grew up watching Bob Wilkins. And Saturday nights and Friday nights were very special, watching these old movies. And some of them I didn't always understand why they were frightening. I showed White Zombie with Bela Lugosi.
Of course.
Last year. And I hadn't seen it since I was a kid. And there was so much more to pick up from that. And I was so happy that I got to do that movie and breathe so much more information into this movie that wasn't that much for me when I was a little kid. But as a very young person, my family would read me bedtime stories, and unfortunately, Mrs. Pigglewiggle and Uncle Wiggily got really boring fast. So my mother would read me Rat Bradbury, and and my aunt would read Lovecraft, and grandmother would read the children's Hitchcock books.
Nice.
There was actually a series of hardbound Hitchcock stories for children.
I love that.
That's what I was brought up with.
Oh, I love it. So you were in the literature portion, so it's sort of very early for you. What are some of your memories of reacting to those things? Because HP Lovecraft is not like easily digestible horror by any means. It's very cerebral. It's very mind. Big words. I was public education system. For me. A lot of reviewing the thesaurus. So very thought provoking type of horror. It's certainly not what our generation grew up with. We started with Goosebumps and Are You Afraid of the Dark, which aren't exactly the highlights of modern literature by any means. It's it's children Canadian television. But so I'm very curious about what your do you remember what your reaction was as a kid? Were you excited, delighted, horrified, inspired? All the above?
Well, Lovecraft. I just showed a Lovecraft movie, and we talk about You can't make a good Lovecraft movie because you cannot put on film that which is unnameable and incomprehensible. So for me, as a small child, a lot of the Lovecraft was scary. You knew it was supposed to be scary, but you really didn't quite get that unnameable dread. And that's actually something that helps with Lovecraft, because every time you go back and you look at it, you're seeing a little bit more. You're a little older, you're a little more understanding of how things work, and you really start to appreciate this dread that is coming up. Because for those people that don't read Lovecraft, most of his stories start out with, your friend has sent you a letter that says, if I died, it's this. Oh, yeah, by the way, your friend is dead, and because you got the letter, you're going to die now, too. So, it's too late. Everyone's going to die.
And that's where we begin. We start the story there. Then we start at 8, and then we go to 20. We turn it up to 20.
Up to 11, man.
Yeah. 11. They speak us go to 11.
Yes.
Why don't you just make the top one 10, and then just leave it there? But these speakers go to 11. God, I love that movie. And actually, funny enough, that's something that I was very inspired. I had a rough time in high school, but I had a great teacher in junior year of high school who was an English teacher, Mr. Kane. I will remember him forever. And he was such a profound expert of literature. And I remember something he said, and it's it's simple advice, it's simple wisdom, but it makes so much sense, which is he's like, Mark, always read a book twice. He's like, because the book doesn't change, but you do. And I actually had that with a non-horror book, with The Red Badge of Courage. I've read that book 3 times, but I've read it over the span of 5 different years. And I remember looking at it different ways. When I was younger, it was a patriot rah-rah kind of book, and I was all inspired. And then I read it a second time, and then it became Born on 4th of July, where I was very bitter about the whole book. And then now it's much more nuanced. I can see both sides of it. And it's interesting how it does for literature, but it also does that for film as well. When you were growing up, obviously literature was first, but what were some of the films and television shows of horror that kind of creeped into your life?
Well, it's interesting. I had this slurry of bad movies that sort of came in, and I'm really a child of the early 70s, so a lot of the early 70s gave us some really good, scary stuff.
I'm literally wearing a Last House on the Left shirt right now. So there's that.
So actually, the one that I remember the most as really being shocking was actually a sci-fi movie, Planet of the Apes, because it was the first movie where the bad guys won.
Yeah.
And in the same way, if you look at Lovecraft's Mountains of Madness, which I think is one of the few books they could actually make a good movie out of. These people are in the Mountains of Madness, and the monsters killed a bunch of people, and they're following him in underground tunnels, and eventually they can't follow him anymore, and they fly out of the area and leave. And whatever it is pops up over the clouds. And when you're reading it the first time, you think, oh, it's chasing them, and they escape. But that's not really it. It's sad because the monster is intelligent, and it realizes that it's several million years away from everyone and everything it's ever known, and there's no way home. Mm. And that's really very sad. And it's the same sort of thing you got at the end of the Planet of the Apes, as our hero comes to the realization that there's no going home. He's far, far too far away. And so that really struck me as a kid, because it was unfair. And I was kind of a rah-rah kid. I was a kid that you were supposed to play fair and be honest, and life was going to work for you. And it doesn't always work that way. And I still find that out every day as an adult.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a film that did that for me. I think the only one that comes to mind, and it always comes to mind, is Sicario. If you've not seen it, I highly recommend it. It's about the Mexican drug cartel, and I just remember leaving that movie after watching it and feeling just dirty, and just the entire grime of the world, being on me and being extremely unfair. And it's very interesting that entertainment and pieces of art can really give that kind of emotional gravitas to an individual, where things don't always, it's a life lesson, things don't always work out. It's very interesting that you got that life lesson very, very early on, that, that sometimes life doesn't always work out. It must have been a trip though, seeing Planet of the Apes, back then. Did you see it in the theater or did you see it in
I saw it in the theater. I went to Go Ape, if you know what that is.
Went to go? No, I don't know what that is. Educate us.
Oh, well, that's when the theaters got together and they put all the Planet of the Apes movies together and into one big afternoon matinee, and you would go and they give out bananas. and
that's awesome.
That was a great way. The afternoon matinee where there'd be two movies was a great way to get rid of your kids for a couple of hours, and this was like 5 or 6 hour episode, to get rid of your kids. And it was a great thing to go see. And of course, all your friends would be there, and it was lots of fun.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's awesome. It's kind of funny, how, that I think that was the same thing with my dad for Jaws when he was growing up and seeing Jaws in the theater and just being completely blown away. And and you couldn't even believe that was being done. Or my grandmother seeing The Exorcist, and just walking out, just going, "What the fuck was that?"
It's always weird when I had this darling grandmother. She was the ancient grandmother, and she was raised very, very properly. She was Victorian. And you did not say things like pregnant. You were with child or something like that, but there are just words that you did not use around her. And she desperately tried to be in touch with us, and she really wanted to reach out to my brother and I and have that connection. And so she decided to take us to a movie. As young people, I'm in my early teens, I guess, at this point. And the newest sci-fi movie was out, so she took us to it. It was so popular, we had to sit in separate places. So she's in the way back, I'm in the front row. Unfortunately, she's taken us to David Bowie's The Man Who Fell to Earth, which has a lot of nudity in it and a lot of very bizarre scenes. You could hear her gasping all the way in the back row. But she was trying so hard. On the way home, she's like, what interesting photography they had in that.
What's going on over there? Look at over there.
She wants to say something nice about it, but it's a weird movie by anybody's standards. And certainly not the movie a grandmother should have taken a couple of her grandkids to. But she was trying so hard.
What other, what other things were inspiring you as you were growing up and see, because you had to see a lot of really amazing horror movies. I can already tell that there were, you came through, the Renaissance of the 80s, and I'm sure you saw quite a few things.
Yeah, in the 80s, I was one of the first ones of my friends had a VCR. So those trips down to Blockbuster and people don't realize that any place that could do it would start carrying videos. And of course, the most common videos that they would carry would be a little porn and some really gross horror.
Yeah, absolutely.
And a lot of it would be the really off stuff. And you could get some of the best movies that way. I remember watching Evil Dead when it first came out.
Oh, love it.
Yeah. Or, we talk about, movies that, change the world. Things like, again, in a sort of Lovecraftian way, it's a sci-fi story, but it's also a very Lovecraftian story, Soylent Green.
Heard of it, never got to see it.
Oh, wow. They made a bunch of these movies about the world gone mad, biology, and Soylent Green is one of them. The tagline for the movie kind of spoils it, but the plot is that the Earth has been in trouble for a long time, and you have multi-generational people living in their cars. People don't realize that. You see people living in their cars, and the tires are gone, and the seats are stripped down. It's not because someone has stolen them. It's because they've been worn through. because no one can afford to fix anything for generations.
Wow.
And they're down to the Soylent Company makes crackers, which people eat. And they've just released Soylent Green, the new protein cracker made from the last protein source on the planet, which is plankton. But if you know anything about the greenhouse effect, you know that's the first thing that dies. So it ain't plankton they're eating.
It's a Sweeney Todd experience.
And there's so much background for it. It's one of those movies I'd love to show. But it was a very, very important movie for a lot of reasons. They also had Silent Running, which is about deforestation, essentially.
Of course.
And which is known as a hippie sci-fi movie because Joan Baez sang the theme song for it. You have Food of the Gods. It was Food of the Gods 2 even, about nature gone mad. They did Day of the Animals. So a lot of this stuff makes you wonder about the science end of things. Of course, I always say I was that kid that when they were reading from the big black book, you know, of spells or something, I was taking notes. I figured eventually I'd put a whole spell together somewhere along the line and be able to do something. So I was the kid that took notes on what to do. That could be a movie plot right there. Some kid actually, I think they've probably done that one.
Hey, that's part of Scream. The kids saw the horror movies and like the slasher movies and like I could do that. I could do that. I could pull that off. And it's so, I've said this about horror a lot, and I'm sure you'll agree, and maybe you can even expand upon it. But there are two types of horror movies, or they do a combination of both, which is horror movies that are just balls to the wall fun, where you just watch people die and do creative things. It's the Sauls and the Final Destinations after the first one. The first one was great and had a great story, but like after that, you just watch people die creatively. And, the Freddy's versus Jasons of the world, like those are fun and you watch them. And then there's horror that actually is going to say something. That wants to say something important through the lens of horror, or it's both. A both example would be Reanimator. I think it's one of my favorite horror movies of all time, right next to Scream and Cabin in the Woods, and they have something to say, but they're also very fun, and they are in a lot of ways balls to the wall. So I'm sure you can agree with that sentiment that through the lens of horror, you can say a lot of really interesting and often very important things.
Well, art mirrors reality. And we hold this mirror up so that we can see things watered down so that we can take them in without so much of the original emotional content, where we look at things and we say, gee, was this good or bad? I was just talking to a comic person, and I used to read comic books, and there's a Green Lantern back in the 60s where he has been out in space helping aliens for a while, and he comes back to Earth, and somebody says, I hear, they got blue aliens, they got green aliens, they got yellow aliens. When are you going to come back and help the browns and the blacks and the reds that are here? And that's really what a lot of it does. It says, here, we can't talk about what's on Earth, so we'll make them aliens, and now we can talk about these problems. And I like that. And you have that with horror in a lot of ways. Horror is very personal. Mm-hmm. You have that person that's giving you that problem, and you wonder, gee, can I really wall them up into a brick wall somewhere and leave them to die? I've had a lot of thoughts about that lately.
And it's very healthy that you think about those things. It's very healthy.
Yeah.
So that way you don't actually do them in real life, because in the words of Louis C.K., it really sucks to go to jail for murder. If murder was,
I don't know. I mean, I was just telling someone, there's a comedian talking about, black people get arrested for being black in public. White people get off on everything. So if you go to prison, there's a white guy here, he did it. He did something. Arrested. The other guys might just be visiting, but he did something. Watch out for that guy.
And he's probably the scariest motherfucker in there.
And if I have to go in for murder, I want it to be something creative. I want it to be something where people are going to look like, I don't want to piss off that guy while I'm in here. I want to look at the wall and wonder where I'm going to be next week.
He homes a bunch of people. They're all in the walls now. It's the final conclusion of the Telltale Heart. But yeah, no.
Ask of Amontillado.
Oh, absolutely. Or what my people used to do, just dig a hole in a pit in the basement. I'm
Another luck.
I'm Italiano, so so we had our share of of things in our checkered history. No, that's awesome. Let's get into this. So how did this adventure of yours kind of intersect into creating a career? How did that adventure start with developing a show and getting into the whole thing? I'm sure there were multi steps, and you mentioned a funny story before the podcast about how you used to have such a shitty tripod that it would like lean to the left, and that was that was the start of your career. So I mean, as where did that whole thing start? How did you get from the leaning tower of tripod to to this pretty good show that you've been doing for almost 15 years?
Well, I started in this. I always say I just got sucked into it because I like half the guys in San Francisco. I just got sucked into it. What happened was, like I said, an associate of mine who actually knew Tom Walsh and John Stanley got asked to bring the show back, and he reached out to me because, well, to him I was the tech guy. I had a palm quarter, I had a laptop, I was making some videos for YouTube. And which had nothing to do with horror. And so he asked me, let's set this up in my attic. And he was going to be the host. Well, which is also the reason why on my show I talk about I'm still in the attic.
Okay.
So what happened was it turned out that he was a blackout alcoholic. And it became very quickly very difficult to work with him because we would start filming at 9:00 in the morning, so he wouldn't be drunk, and he would start sneaking alcohol and had to go to the bathroom, and he was keeping his beer in the bathroom and that sort of thing. And that man could drink beer faster than I can drink water. Let me tell you, he could just pour it straight down. It was frightening.
Oof.
And so I got to his place one day, and he's on the couch. And I'm assuming he's passed out from last night, but he might be from this morning because he's good at that. And he yells at me, when we started, all I was the cameraman, and he was the host, and he did all the work. And as time progressed, I wound up doing everything except sitting in the chair. And he said, "You think it's so easy to sit in the chair? You do it." Okay. And that was it. I took over and I started doing the show. And I moved to a different location out of his house. I moved the filming from out of his house. And I started doing it. And, like I said, I had a crappy tripod and a palm corner I had bought at Big Lots. That's how good we were going here. $20 palm quarter. And, like I said, the tripod had a lean to it. And I kind of liked that because Creature Features was never a polished show, shall we say. It was, all these shows tend to be a bit rough around the edges. And so when I got a better tripod, I kept it slightly tilted for a long time to put up for this. And, I had a lot of fun with it. We did a weekly show for a while, a live show. And doing a live show will teach you a lot of stuff about what can go wrong. You think you know what you're doing until you do a live show. Then you learn.
Well, now you just fell into a very interesting trap here, sir. Because now I want to hear all about it. I want to hear about because when we have other filmmakers on, our favorite segment, and Zach can back me up, is talking about all of our, woes and crazy stories that have happened. We've had a director who was on a set and TV exploded before he got there. So we've certainly had quite a few interesting things. I've had to deal with renting a cop car and you talk about a guy who was difficult to deal with. That guy might have been an alcoholic. He's the guy that if I saw him in person, he caused me so much frustration. I probably would have killed him, put him in that cop car, and drove him into Lake Michigan. I probably shouldn't say that in recorded podcasts as much as I do.
I would like to point out this show is satire. Do not take anything you see or hear seriously, please, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Zach. I appreciate that little stigma. So, we love talking about funny stories over the years, and so what have been some of your wild stories about doing the live shows and then your regular show?
Well, in the process of getting into all of this, my background is actually manufacturing. And so I know a lot of manufacturing processes, and I started working in props in film. So my first feature-length film I did, which was about this time, was a horror movie. And I was doing, like I said, props. And if you worked on a film set, especially a cheap production, you can stand there. Okay, you're now a light stand here. You're in lighting. Go hold this light. You can read. Okay, you're now scripty. Make sure they're saying the lines properly. And there was a dead baby squirrel outside on the lawn, and the producer picked it up and said, I need a ghost or a ghoul eating this. You take your shirt off and you're going to come out of the room gnawing on this thing. And that was my first time in front of the camera. And the crew was just horrified when I did this, and not realizing I had it in my hand. And I'm chewing on my knuckles while I'm doing it. I didn't actually put it in my mouth. But they couldn't see that from the camera angle. And they're all like, you want some hand sanitizer for that, man? You want some mouthwash? You got to wash your hands after that. And I was fine. So I often tell that story, and I tell people, if you're not willing to eat a dead squirrel on camera, you're not ready to be an actor yet. So, that's what being an actor is, doing everything.
No, I always joke. I say we're performing circus monkeys. I could say though, I can honestly say though, I have the acting background, and I do a lot of the executive producing, and I've done a lot of shit. I've jumped off roofs. I've ran down blocks. I have jumped off of stages with broken, sprained ankles and legs and all kinds of stuff. I have been killed multiple times on camera.
You're welcome.
I have embarrassingly been in a clown horror movie where I did embarrassing sex scenes with other clowns. So I've done that, but I can. I've tried
to. It's funny you mentioned the sex scene, because we had that in that first horror movie too.
Oh God, I tried to forget this movie, but my friends, all of my friends that are the best friends that I can come up with, don't let me forget about it, and also they make me repeat. There's a line in, so it's supposed to be this like weird, it's about a cult of clowns that are terrorizing a town, and I'm having sex with this girl, and it's supposed to be a reference about how my penis is a balloon animal. So I literally scream to the girl before I arrive turn my dick into a T-Rex, and I shout it really loud directly to camera. And Zach's laughing hysterically right now. And I've been asked to repeat that line. I never knew that was going to be my Macaulay Culkin thing that I would have to do for fucking years after the fact. And it's only about the people I love. It's only about my friends that are the best friends I can have, which probably says more about me than it does about them. But the point was, I can honestly say that I have never ate a dead squirrel on camera. So maybe I think some of these things at least puts me in the runner-up. The least, but you just mentioned that you did a sex scene, so I gotta hear about that.
Okay. Well, I didn't do the sex scene. There was a sex scene. I was part of it. So if you haven't noticed, I'm a pudgy little bald guy, and so this is a sort of a possession movie. So we've got the big haunted house, and there's a bed, and we got the people in the bed. And you've got these other actors that come out, and the big muscly guys, doing the chanting, and we're lopsided. We got like 4 guys on one side and 3 guys on the other side. And the producer says, "Hey, take your clothes off and go stand there with them in their underwear." I should also point out the lead came out in boxers, and the producer's like, "That's not going to work." And the assistant director, and this can only happen in San Francisco, goes into his personal bag and pulls out a G-string in an appropriate size for this.
Hold on. You just like happen to have that equipment on you. There's only like one block in Chicago that can happen. And that's Belmont and Halstead. That's the only block. Zach knows exactly what I'm talking about. That would be our lovely Boys Town, and that's the only place that you can guarantee somebody will have that equipment on them at that time. That is a pretty impressive call where somebody could I just have that on my person. I just have that, which is impressive.
Well, we can talk about that. I've got something for that in a second. But anyway, I have to go stand behind. I'm trying to stand behind everybody, This little pudgy white guy behind this great big muscly black guy next to me and going, and so that's my sex scene. So I had to tell the wife about my sex this movie. The scary thing is there's even more horrifying things in that I can't tell you that went on that set. So
fair enough.
Yes, but now I'm going to blank here for just a second. I was going to tell you something else.
It was about the G-string. Somebody pulling out.
G-string, right? Yeah. So when I work, I have what I like to refer to as the idiot box. So when I'm on set, I have my idiot box with this giant tackle box, and I am known as the guy is that if you need it, I have it. I'm working on this biker movie, and the director comes up and goes, "I have a GoPro, but I don't have a SD card, a micro SD card." Yep, got one of those. Needs to be charged. I don't have a charge cable for it. Yep, got one of those. I don't have a helmet mount for this. No, I don't have a helmet mount. That's pushing it a little bit too far. If you're going to have the GoPro, have your own mount for it. I mean, come on. So.
Fair enough. I love that you have a tackle box. So I just wanted to just bridge some stuff here because I think we're missing maybe some connections within the story, which is fine. But I'm trying to so you've worked on multiple different sets, and that was kind of your lead into this crazy world that we call entertainment. So and then you had mentioned that you were working with 2 other guys that had did a similar show to you. How did these worlds eventually meet? Where you're working on film sets, and then you eventually led to these other 2 gentlemen that you mentioned before that were doing a Sven Gulli style show. How did these 2 worlds collide?
Well, like I said, I was working with Creepy Dave, as we call him, and he just couldn't wind up being the host, so I took over being the host, and
okay, gotcha.
I just kept doing the show and having fun with it. And as time went on, everything. If you look at my set, everything on my set's got a story about how I acquired that. A lot of it's quite by accident. When I first started doing the show, I have this dining room set, which has a giant throne, black chair. It's great, and so that's what I was using. But it was getting a little shop worn, so I was casting about for a different chair. And I'm in a Goodwill, as I often am, and there's a yellow rocking chair. Now, Bob Wilkins always used a yellow rocking chair. I'm like, there, it's Kismet. There's a yellow rocking chair. And that's how I picked up the yellow rocking chair, and that's why I still have it today. The piece of furniture behind me, the sideboard, whatever you want to call it, was what happened there. Was it was supposed to be this incredibly huge piece of furniture, and I have a hearse, and they thought we'd hang out the back end of the hearse and we could die it down. And I get there, and it's only 6 feet long, so it goes right back in the hearse, no problem. And it was actually kind of cool, so I kept it. And that's how that came in. And,
nice.
And so all the little changes, they all have something to do with it. And something I'll tell you that you probably didn't know is that I'm a big prop collector. I collect original props and some replicas, and so there are actually some original props to movies on the set, if you look carefully. If you see, there's a canopic jar. That is actually from Brendan Fraser's The Mummy.
Nice. Love
yes.
that.
there's a statue of the alien, which is actually one of 300, I think they made for the European release of the movie. They would put these in the theaters, and I was able to acquire one of them. And that's a fun piece. And so bits and pieces show up on the set. I bring them out. I have a Bowen original bronze of Cthulhu, one of the very famous ones that comes out occasionally. I have several different Cthulhus on the set, actually. And actually, if you've watched the show, you'll notice that my cohort, Bob, the skull, sits on a copy of the Necronomicon and the Yellow Pages. And as I always say, you know the difference between the two books.
The one's actually dead?
One is an ancient tome of forgotten knowledge, and the other one's a Necronomicon.
I knew it was something in that vein, which I love.
No one uses the Yellow Pages anymore, right? So.
You know, I was actually in that business. I sold it. It was only a couple of years ago. You'll actually be amazed on how many people still use it. It's hilarious. We have the numbers. It's I don't know who the hell is using it, but we do have the tracking numbers in there. We're like, who's using this? What's going on? How do we get paid for this? It's amazing. You know, and actually, there's a little bit of a shout out. A dear friend of ours, his name's James Zazera. He runs a non-for-profit floating museum. Zach, what's the name of it so I can probably...
The HSPPA.
And he is a props, a restoration and individual. He collects a bunch of different things. He's got stuff for days. He has the gun from RoboCop, which he came on. It's actually one of our last 2 podcasts ago, or 3 podcasts ago. He was on, and he also has one of the machetes from Friday the 13th. He has the piece from Spaceballs, the barf piece, face piece. He has dozens and dozens of things.
I have the head of yogurt from that.
What?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So after this podcast, I'm going to send you the link to all of his stuff, and you guys should definitely have a conversation because I think that he would be very interested to see what you have, and you would definitely be interested to see what he has because he has a lot of stuff. He operates in the Midwest, Southwest, and also up in New Jersey as well. He is a co-owner of a horror-themed gluten-free bakery called Spooky Swirls. And actually, one of the girls was recently on a Food Network competition. I forgot which one, but yeah, one of the co-owners, and he has part of his museum inside there in Arizona. So I'll definitely send you his information after the fact. So something you mentioned earlier was like you never know, you don't know nothing until you do something live. What are some of the things, funny stories or hard lessons that you've had to learn by doing things live that you were willing to share?
Well, I mean, there's always an equipment failure. You always need. I was renting a facility to show a movie, and they had a big soundboard great for sound, great. So I'm gonna plug I got a digital projector, my computer into that. And we'll plug the soundboard. What they didn't tell us at that point was the soundboard is on the other side of this giant room. It doesn't move. It's got wheels, but it doesn't actually move. So I've got to reach in and try to find 20 feet of cord to reach this machine so that we can have sound for the night.
Jesus.
And that was not the most professional thing we've had to do, but we've done it. I've had equipment failures. It's not, producers always like to chat about all the things that went wrong. I was on a film set, and one of our main characters has this big beard, and we came back the next week, and he decided to shave it.
What?
I didn't think about it.
What the fuck?
That's
something that like I try to be sensitive with that, man, because people always forget, but I'm also an actor, and it's when you see stuff that you go, dude, what the fuck are you doing, bro? Like trust me, there's stuff that I've been doing it long enough that I get very upset when people do even the simplest, stuff they fuck up. That's, I should probably be a little bit more sensitive because that could happen to anybody. You get in the habit of doing stuff and you shave it off, but still, They
beard's not like shaving, not like shaving to this morning. It takes a while to take a beard off.
Yeah, exactly.
We had a girl that was doing a topless scene, and she didn't want to have nudity. Well, she had long black hair, which she then cut short because she wanted to look good for the shot. I said, okay, that's fine. Take your shirt off and go, well, I don't want any nudity. Don't I have something I can wear? No, we've never discussed having anything for you to wear. We don't have something for you to wear. This is your scene. You can either do it or you can leave. And she thought that was terribly unfair.
Tough. Life's tough. Get a helmet. I don't know what to tell you.
She did agree to do the scene, right?
Yeah.
Then what is she expecting? Like,
I don't know about that one. That's just I could talk for days about this. So you've obviously been doing this for coming up on 15 years, and something that I'd love to ask, and one, how has the response from the community been? And what's something that keeps you going? The 15 years we've only been doing this for what almost 4 years now,
4 or 5,
4 or 5 years, and everything else. But for 15 years to be coming back and still putting on the I believe you wear a fez on the show. So putting that fez on for 14
an eye patch,
and an eye patch for 14 and a half years, coming up on 15 is a long time. What keeps you coming back?
Pure spite. All right. I enjoy doing this, and I like working in film, and I like problem solving. I found that, for instance, I had trouble with lighting. I said, I want this kind of light. And I kind of described it, and people gave me different things that would cause that kind of light. And none of them were right. And it turns out that what I needed was the most common kind of light out there, a par can. Some par 58s and par 56s and whatever they are, and a par 64. And that was exactly what I was looking for. But it took forever because people tend to only know the equipment they're used to working with.
True.
You can't go to it's very hard to go find someone that's a professional that's actually worked on all this other different stuff, because what they've worked with is something that's probably not the cutting edge, but the next step down from it, because it had to trickle down to them. So that was a big problem, and I had to figure out, like I said, what I was using. I had some issues. I am in a big old house here, and we only had one 20-amp circuit for the entire attic. And that's very hard to run all these lights on 20 amps. So that was exciting. Got real into LEDs. We had issues with sound because we have some tin-roofed outbuildings, and we have goats. So they like to dance on them and make noise. And whenever I hear them, I often comment that Mom downstairs must be having guests over. I don't want to say that party last week was wild, but I woke up when I came out from my room. Satan was asleep on the couch, and he didn't want to make eye contact with me.
Yeah, that's a pretty wild party.
Yeah. So yeah, it's been very interesting. And when I say pure spite, there is actually a little something there. About 6 years ago, I became on national television, national stations. Rather than say something like a broadcast or local PS public access television. I was on national television, and somebody came up and basically said, "Oh, I own the rights to all of that." Well, no, you don't, actually. I had filed for the trademark. And somebody who had a lot of money, and there was a lot of confusion and obfuscation of the facts, and we wound up going to court. There's actually federal papers filed on this, and so there is actually another creature feature show out there which claims to be from Bob Wilkins, and I've had to go down a huge rabbit hole of all this information that I had no clue about. That I think most fans had no clue about. I think even the old producer of the show had no clue about, because they'd forgotten. And I don't know why they did this, but they chose to do this, and it was a big problem. So actually, when this came out, they came all over Facebook and screamed all sorts of terrible things about me, made an actual page about how horrible I was, which we made a point, me and a couple of my associates made a point of screenshotting every week for the documentary that we'll be putting together when this all dies away. And it's been interesting because I've had detractors that have now turned around and realized that, yeah, I actually have the rights to my show, and this other guy is not quite above board on a number of things. I've had a lot of people complain to me about him. That's one of the things, is that my show had been going on for so long. When people search to find the other show, I get his mail. I get the fan mail for that show, and the lead guy is not the person who gets fan mail. It's the girl. She gets the fan mail.
So I'm sure you get a lot of interesting fan mail.
Well, I like to have a fairly straightforward relationship with my fans. If you go, like on my YouTube page, I like to respond to every single comment ever made. And if you keep commenting to me, I will keep talking back to you about it. We have a lot of fun. I like to keep it light and fun. It's supposed to be fun.
Exactly.
I don't talk politics. I don't. I sometimes allude to, what I'd like to do to a politician in general. Some of these things, but I had to actually fight quite hard for this, and I did have some negative experiences. I had some people that I thought were my friend that turned out and suddenly they're not. And it's been interesting because as time has gone on, many of these people have slowly started. A lot of my detractors are now on my friends list on Facebook. They're now subscribed to my channel. I've had some of them come up to me and say, gee, that was a raw deal. Sorry about it. But the page is still up, though. And people can still go to it. And it's all so much fun. But it's gotten embarrassing, sadly. And that's really the problem with it, is that the Wilkins estate very laterally got involved with it and allowed these people to say some negative things. And the problem with that is that they're never going to be able to take back what they said. And unless they do that, I can't reach out to them, and I want to. These are people that I interviewed when we first did the show back in 2009. WonderCon, we interviewed Bob Wilkins' son and John Stanley and Tom Wersch and so forth. And now I can't really interact with these people anymore, which is a shame, because this is supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be about community and bringing people together. And these people worked really hard to shove a big wedge in, all for them to sort of fall flat. So,
yeah, it's terrible how that happens. So we had a dear friend who I remember I won't mention his name, but I remember he told us a great quote, and he, is it because of contracts and everything else, my ex-best friend is, we were at a convention when we had this conversation. He's 15 feet that direction, and he won't even make eye contact with me anymore. So, and it's sad. It's sad. But what the funny thing is that I'm actually, I think the friend of ours is very grateful to have gone through the experience, and I think he's grown stronger because of it and everything else, to really understand where everybody truly stands and realities and and all that stuff. But it's a shame that it happened. It's a shame that it happened. Shame that it had to happen. That's also, the Temptations had a great quote. It said, "It's show business. While you're on stage doing the show, make sure your business isn't walking out the back door." And there's and I've been in business my whole life, so there's certainly some parts of it that you want to try to avoid being ruthless, but there are some ruthless aspects of it. You try to avoid it as much as you can, because it's ultimately not good for business to have that much downfall and that much conflict and turmoil, but there's some problems with it. It happens, but But some Megadeth, the band Megadeth exists because of spite. So we've gotten a lot of really great shit out of spite. So and I love that you know that reference. It makes me happy that you laughed at that. Zach knows those stories. We're massive metal fans. It comes with the territory. So how is the you talked a little bit about the interaction you have with fans and everything else, but I imagine that's also part of what keeps you coming back is the community, because I talk about the horror community all the time, and it's so ironic that the community that's in love with horrible things, very gruesome things, are some of the nicest, sweetest, most accepting and willing to help community around. So it's I imagine that plays into effect of you keep coming back every day. It's because of the fans and because of the love that they show you. How's that experience been with interacting with the fans?
Well, it's been very interesting. We have an active core community here in the San Francisco Bay Area, and for the most part, they all turned their back on me when this all happened. So in order to go to be at conventions and so forth, I had to go back east. And once you got away from California, people didn't care about these little infighting stuff. And I found a great deal of love and friendship with a lot of the other horror hosts. I have never had a negative experience with any other horror host out there. And it's been great. I did want to sort of point out, we talk about spite and drive and so forth. When I got on national television, I was barely ready for that. That's how it is. You wind up getting someplace just before you're really ready for it. And my wife, much like me, is a licensed professional, and somebody who will remain nameless started saying that she actually wasn't licensed. And now my wife didn't really like me taking all my time doing the show. So it actually got back to her that they were claiming that she was not a licensed individual in her field of business. My wife is Ivy League, graduated summa cum laude. She's very proud of herself, and she should be. So when that happened, then she said, okay, now you can spend the money on the show. Now you can actually get things and make it work right, which is why I think I'm the only horror host now that films in 6K. And nice. We have a lot more fun. Yeah. Nice. So that's when I was really able to blossom with the set and spend a little money, because everything else at that point I'd gotten all from Goodwill or off of Craigslist or something, So ultimately, if you stay sweet, even in the most negative times, good things will happen too. And that's what I try to keep with. So yeah, I went back east and I met lots of people. I hadn't got to meet Dooley yet, the little spider from one guy's show. But other than that, I've had a wonderful time, and it's helped expand what I do and how I do things. And I think it's also helped me make sure that my show is a bit different from everybody else's.
Okay.
So that brings me back to a lot of this stuff. And I like working in film, and I'm one of those guys, we start talking like we did. I'm like, oh, there's a plot right there. We can make a movie out of that. Let's do that.
I have a very close relationship with my dad, and he has a dear, dear friend named Brian, and Brian T, as we call him, and he's a fireman, been a fireman his whole life. Since he was 18, and then he went on to be an arson investigator. Still does that today, but he's retired from being a fireman and everything else. And very typical, the fireman. He could have been in the magazines for the fireman thing. Very good looking guy, salt and pepper, the whole 9 yards. Very But I remember he said something so interesting, and it's profound wisdom, and I've taken it into my life, which is he's like, some people just do things. He's like, and he told my dad, it's like, you make money. It's what you do. Just what you do. And I remember he said, Mark Conway Sr. could fall into a pile of shit and find a way to make money out of it. It's just what he does. And it's like, I run into burning buildings while everybody's running out. That's just what I do. That's just, what I see the world as. And I was like, that's a goal for everybody. You should find out what you do. What brings you the most joy? Everybody does something. Everybody can do something, and then it becomes a part of you. That's your whole personality, but it becomes a huge part of it. And I say, I see things that aren't there yet. I see what it could be. And I take it into the realm of entertainment. What could be there? What could this be? How could I turn this into something entertaining? Whether it be a film, whether it be a television show, whether it be a theme park, a haunted house, doesn't matter. A podcast, whatever, doesn't matter. What can I do? How can I see this through the lens of entertainment? And that ultimately is what I was destined to do, and I feel very proud that you and I share that, and Zach and I share that to degrees in a lot of different ways. So it's very inspiring to hear you say that, and a person who is on national television say, I'm always constantly thinking about how this could be turned into a film, how this could be turned into some kind of entertainment. So this is not so much a question, more of a compliment to you, sir. That that I appreciate that you share that vision, and it's comforting to know that there are people out there that share that same drive and vision, and they go, they go, how could this idea, this nugget of an idea, be taken all the way to something great?
Well, we touched on Soylent Green earlier, and that's one of the things I take from that movie is that something you probably didn't know is E.G. Roberts is in that, and hope I got that name right, E.G. Roberts. And he was profoundly deaf when it came to make that show. And so you see him talking to Charleston Heston over his back and never misses a line. It's all just timing, and he's perfect. And so at some point in production, it leaks out that he also has terminal cancer. And they're telling him, okay, we're going to get you an assistant. We're going to get you a table and a chair to sit at. And he's like, no, this movie has to be made. I don't want to be given special privileges. And of course, his character dies in the production. And the day they filmed his death, he died 12 days later. That's how sick he was. But he was still showing up because he felt it was important for him to make this movie. And that's what you have to be. This has to be important to you. It can't be something you do just for money, or just for a few cheap laughs somewhere. You have to have some passion in it. Otherwise, you're just the dross that we see so much of on YouTube these days.
And you're going to burn out. And I talk to friends who don't know, and I love having friends that are not in this because it gives me world perspective. But, and I've talked to many people, and I was like, I can't begin to tell you how unsexy filmmaking is, and how frustrating it could be.
Well, I don't know.
I mean, it can get some sexy sometimes, but and there are great aspects and fun aspects, but it is so much harder than you think it is. It's not to the heart of being a coal miner. It's not that kind of hard, but it is so much more difficult and so much more emotionally taxing and so much more marathon running than most people realize. And you have to have a passion, because otherwise you're just going to burn yourself out. You have to love it, and you have to be surrounded by people that love it and can keep you going when you don't feel like it. When you're drained and everything else, you have somebody next to you going, all right, come on, we got to keep going. And then when you get a little bit more energy and they get down, then you can turn to them and say, hey, all right, let's keep going. We got this. Let's get to the finish line. So it's very, very important to have that, that kind of mentality and those kind of people around you.
There are good moments in all of this. I mean,
oh yeah,
there's a young lady who was absolutely lovely inside and out, and we are friends now after working on a particular film, and I was doing sound. This goes into, I guess you could call this one of those little horror stories. So she's hiding under a table. And we realized the only way to do sound is that I have to be under the table behind her with a boom pole up in front of her on the ground sort of thing here. And it wound up being an extended scene. And it was probably not the best day for her to be wearing those yoga pants, because I'm cheek to cheek with her, quite literally, underneath the table for half an hour. trying to concentrate on my sound. And like I said, now we're friends. How can you not be friends after that?
No, it's impossible.
So-
It's
You
impossible.
build one hell of a bond that way.
Shit. you better. You're gonna build some kind of bond. It's either gonna be really positive or really negative. But something is going to happen. It's impossible for it to not happen.
In a lot of ways, that's how I met Margot Kidder. And we'll share a little story here. She and I became good friends. I saw her at a convention before I got into doing film. And I guess she was shilling for Smallville or something. And I told her, 1976, you were in Playboy. And you were the first woman I saw that you weren't some nameless cutie. I knew who you were. And that meant something to me. And she at this point in her career, she's like, oh my gosh, that is so sweet of you. And she reaches down and she pulls out one of the nudes from Playboy she has there. And she writes all this stuff on it. We'll always have Paris. I'm so glad we have. No. Boom. There. So I've got this.
That's awesome.
So-
And a Casablanca line to boot. Which I love. So yeah, no, absolutely. So I think we're gonna at the end of every podcast, what I do is I do a question of the podcast. Essentially, it's an opportunity for us to just ask a fun question. As is per tradition, we give the guest the opportunity to answer first, but if not, they can go ahead and pass, and then we come back around the thing. And I think this is pseudo fitting to what we were talking about earlier, just about horror in general, about being thought provoking. And maybe it's a repeat of what we had talked about, but I'm interested to hear a more condensed version. Why do you think people keep coming back to horror? There's always, the fans keep always coming back, and it's just one thing that just never, ironically enough, could die. Even how mainstream tries to kill it. Although now they're more friends, but why is it that this genre just refuses to go anywhere? It will not disappear and will never disappear. Why do you think the fans, and people just in general keep coming back to this genre?
Well, I think a lot of people say, oh, gee, it shows the dark side of humanity. And I sort of go the other way with it. Horror shows us that bad people can get punished, that bad people are out there, and generally they get punished, although that narrative has changed in the last couple of decades. But the fact that, and it's a meme, but it's true, the fact that I don't go out and do these things to people, now that I've been shown how, is a miracle every day.
It is.
If you're somebody that has seen all the horror movies and all the graphic ways you can do something to someone, and you don't every day, you realize that you're choosing to be a better person. And that's what horror can give us. It can give us that pathway to be the better person.
I love that. That's so.
Horror is something uplifting. There we go.
There you go. Those are it was very poetic. Zach?
I like it because it's fun.
Care to expand?
I mean that's really the simplest way I could put it. I've been watching horror movies since I was 2 years old with my mother. So my mother, I'd watch horror movies like Freddy, Jason, Pinhead, all that. And my grandfather, I'd watch Schwarzenegger, Stallone, all the great action movies of the 80s. I grew up in the 80s while growing up in the 90s. So
figure that one out.
Yeah. But yeah, these movies were always just fun to me while everybody was growing up with Barney, Teletubbies, and all that child shit that I could give 1,000 fucks less about. I just having fun watching people get gutted, murdered, and everything, but also being told, don't do that. That's wrong. Just yep, okay, well, cool. Let's go watch Jaws now. I do to a degree. I think I'm kind of similar to you, which is about uplifting, and but uplifting in a different way. Well, first of all, fear is a universal emotion. It's in the lizard brain, so everybody understands that, and everybody can relate to that, and everybody can discuss that in a very Sorry, Mark.
There's that lizard.
Sorry, yeah, exactly. It's coming to get me. So But everybody can relate to that. Everybody can relate to that in a universal way. And all of a sudden, everybody can relate to that in a very universal way. And it's something, and funny this, we like being scared. I was watching a documentary about haunted houses, and one of the experts says that psychologists say that it's actually good to be scared, because what it does is it trains you to be better prepared in actual life or death situations. And she said a phrase that I love. It turns you into a warrior, which I'm like, I love that. I love that terminology. I love that phrase. But I think on a very deep emotional level, it's very similar to you, which is, it often is not about the not this is not true for every horror movie, because there are some certainly ones that are like, we're just going to end this really, really dark and nobody gets out alive and everyone dies and it's awful. But but a lot of times, especially with the 80s slashers, it's not about the death of everything. It's actually the triumph of one person conquering evil. And there's nothing more human than that. It's the triumph of evil, and knowing that good is going to win the day. Eventually, and that, I think that's what was really good about the 80s slashers, is that the final girl always won out. At the end, and that was the human experience of facing down evil, not running away from it, but facing down your fears, and then conquering them. Which is something that I think, if you want to be a very successful human being, is that instead of running away from your fears, running away from your problems, is to conquer them, is to face them and conquer them. It may not happen right away. It may not happen, it may take years. It may take a long time. It may take your whole life to do it. But in the end, it's worth it. It's worth to do that. It's worth to look the metaphorical Jason or Freddy or Leatherface or anybody and look in the face and say, "Not today, asshole." I think that's what I think a lot of fans come back to horror all the time, and that's the reason why I come back to it. So sir, this is your opportunity to look directly into camera. Oh, thank you. To look directly into camera, in any kind of emotion you like, and tell the good people where they can find you, via television, social media, YouTube's. Tell them where they can find you in any place, and we'll go from there. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you for that. And we have our own Roku channel. You can go to the website, thecreaturefeatureshow.com. We have our own app, the Creature Features Network, where you can download on your phone and watch 24/7 hours of me. We have like 300 free movies on there right now, and a new one every week. I make new content every single week. I'm also on Twitter. Let's see, pull this up here. Twitter, under the Al Omega Show, because Creature Features was taken. And under Instagram, it is the Creature Feature Show. And on Facebook, I have several pages, both being Al Omega and the original Creature Features. So there are lots of places to find me, and you can find me at YouTube at the original Creature Features. That's a great place to find me. And it's that way you get to leave comments and talk to me directly, which I love.
Absolutely, and you can also find him at Al Omega or Al_Omega on Slasher. So thank you. So thank you so much for checking out this episode of the Nightmares Podcast. You can find us where all podcasts are available, on YouTube, Slack, Spotify, several other things that I can't remember right now. And also you can find us on all of the wonderful social medias: YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Slasher, the application for all things horror. Thank you so much, and we will see you next time on the Nightmares Podcast. Bye, guys.